Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Beyond the cloak of midnight, the fading year exhaled its final moments in the heart of the city. Emmanuel took his turn, fingers hovering above the dizzy twirl of a spinning bottle, its glassy caress whispering fate upon the floor. It twirled to a halt, its silent verdict pointing squarely at him, as if the universe had conspired to mark him. With a sly grin, Marcus, his roommate, pounced upon the opportunity like a sly cat, his eyes sparkling with the fire of 1,000 schemes.
"Embrace the masquerade,"
Marcus purred, his voice echoing in the pulse of their eclectic gathering. His words painted a challenge, beckoning to a side of Emmanuel that yearned to breathe but lacked the courage to speak. As Emmanuel stood, his heart soared and fluttered, shackled no longer by the shadows, and a newfound dare awoke from the depths of his being. Full commitment. Makeup, dress, heels, the works. The room erupted in laughter and playful jeers. Emmanuel forced a smile while his stomach twisted into knots. What his friends didn't realize was that they'd just dared him to do something he'd been secretly practicing for years. "Fine," he said, trying to sound appropriately reluctant. "But you guys better not back out of your dares either." Later that night, after everyone had left and Marcus had gone to bed, Emmanuel sat on the edge of his bed, heart racing. The dare was simultaneously his greatest fear and a secret fantasy. He'd never shown his feminine side to anyone before. His cross-dressing had always been a private ritual, stolen moments of authenticity behind locked doors. With trembling hands, he unlocked his phone and created a note titled, "MYE Party Preparation." For the first time, he would transform completely, not just for himself but for others to see. The thought terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. The following afternoon, Emmanuel told Marcus he was going shopping for his costume. This wasn't entirely true. He already owned everything he needed, except for shoes. His collection included several dresses, carefully selected over years of discreet shopping, but none seemed right for this occasion. At the mall, Emmanuel found himself in a boutique that catered to women with taller frames. There it hung on the rack, an emerald green dress with a subtle shimmer that caught the light as it moved. The material was substantial enough to help conceal his masculine features, while accentuating the curves he'd worked to create through targeted exercises. The price tag made him wince, but this wasn't just any outfit. This would be his debut. Next came the shoe store. Emmanuel had researched enough to know his size conversion, but he'd never worn high heels for more than a few minutes at a time in his bedroom. The saleswoman approached with professional courtesy. "Looking for something special?" she asked.
"New Year's Eve party,"
Emmanuel replied, his voice slightly higher than usual.
"I need something that makes a statement."
She nodded without judgment. "I have just the thing." The red stilettos she brought out were both beautiful and intimidating. 5-inch heels with a pointed toe and a strap that wrapped delicately around the ankle. They were nothing like the practical black pumps he practiced in at home. "These will complete any holiday look," she assured him. Emmanuel purchased them without trying them on, too nervous about drawing attention. He hurried home with his packages, locking himself in his room to prepare. Hours before the party, Emmanuel began his transformation. First came the careful shaving of his body, followed by foundation to mask any shadow of facial hair. He'd watched countless makeup tutorials over the years, practicing in secret, but tonight's application had to be flawless. The emerald dress fit perfectly, hugging his waist and flaring slightly at the hips thanks to the shapewear beneath. The blonde wig he'd ordered months ago but rarely worn needed careful styling. He arranged the long, straight locks to frame his face, softening his jawline. As Emmanuel applied the final touches of mascara, a sense of calm washed over him. The person in the mirror wasn't Emmanuel anymore. This was Chloe, the name he'd whispered to himself during these private moments for years. The red stilettos were the final piece. Chloe slipped them on, instantly growing 5 inches taller. Her practiced walk became more precarious on these unfamiliar heels, but they made her feel powerful despite the discomfort. A knock on his bedroom door made her jump.
Dude, people are arriving. Are you actually going through with this?
Marcus called through the door. Chloe took a deep breath. I'll be out in a minute. One final look in the mirror. Blonde hair catching the light. Emerald dress hugging her figure. Red stilettos extending her legs. This was it. No turning back now. When Chloe opened her bedroom door, the hallway was empty. Music pulsed from the living room where voices and laughter mingled. Each step in the red heels demanded concentration. The click-clack announced her arrival before she'd even rounded the corner. The conversation didn't stop all at once. It died in patches as people noticed her. Marcus, mid-sentence with a beer in hand, froze with his mouth open.
Holy shit,
he finally said. Emmanuel?
It's Chloe tonight,
she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Marcus recovered quickly, raising his beer.
Well, damn, everyone. Meet Chloe.
What followed wasn't the ridicule or awkward silence Chloe had feared. Instead, a group of their female friends swarmed her, examining her makeup technique and complimenting her dress. The men seemed unsure how to react at first, but soon the initial shock gave way to the typical party atmosphere. "Those heels are amazing," said Jasmine, Marcus's girlfriend. "How are you walking in them?" "Very carefully," Chloe admitted, steadying herself against a wall. "They're new." "Let me help you," Jasmine offered, linking arms with her. "The trick is to walk heel to toe and keep your core tight." With Jasmine's guidance, Chloe began to move more confidently. The red stilettos still pinched her toes mercilessly, but she wouldn't have taken them off for anything. They completed her transformation. As midnight approached, Chloe found herself in conversation with people who'd never given Emmanuel more than passing attention. Her feminine presentation seemed to grant her access to different types of interactions, deeper conversations, more genuine laughter, meaningful eye contact. 10, 9, 8, the crowd began to chant as midnight approached. Chloe stood in the center of the room, champagne flute in hand, surrounded by friends and acquaintances who were seeing parts of her true self for the first time. 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year! In that moment, as confetti fell and cheers erupted, Chloe made a decision. The new year wouldn't just bring the usual hollow resolutions. This year would be different. Emmanuel would stay behind with the old year. Chloe would step forward into the new one. The party continued well into the early morning. Despite the growing discomfort of the red stilettos, Chloe didn't take them off. They had become symbolic, painful, but transformative. At 4 a.m., as the last guest departed and Marcus crashed in his room, Chloe stood alone in the bathroom, removing her makeup. Layer by layer, the carefully constructed facade should have dissolved back into Emmanuel, but something had changed. Even as the last traces of eyeshadow disappeared, the person in the mirror wasn't entirely Emmanuel anymore. The emerald dress was still on, the blonde hair slightly disheveled but still framing her face. The red stilettos had been kicked off, revealing angry red marks where they'd rubbed against her skin. "Happy New Year, Chloe," she whispered to her reflection. The following morning brought a pounding headache and the mess typical of post-party cleanup. Chloe awoke still in her emerald dress, having fallen asleep before changing. The blonde wig had shifted awkwardly in her sleep. The red stilettos lay on the floor where she'd dropped them. Marcus was already in the kitchen when she emerged from her room, having changed into comfortable sweatpants, but keeping the blonde wig on, properly adjusted. She'd made a quick decision that morning. Today wouldn't be the day she retreated back to Emmanuel.
"Morning,"
Marcus said, eyeing her over his coffee mug.
"So, dare completed successfully. You were the hit of the party."
Chloe poured herself coffee, choosing her words carefully. "About that, I've been thinking—"
"Oh no,"
Marcus interrupted with a laugh. "Please tell me you're not still drunk." "I'm serious," she said, sitting across from him. "Last night felt right. More right than I've felt in, well, ever." Marcus set down his mug, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying that wasn't just a costume for me. It's who I am, who I want to be." The words tumbled out faster than she'd intended. "I've been cross-dressing in private for years. The dare just gave me the excuse to finally show that part of myself." Silence stretched between them. Chloe could hear the refrigerator humming in the background, the clock ticking on the wall. Her heart hammered against her ribs.
"So, you want to be Chloe full-time?"
Marcus finally asked. "Yes." Marcus nodded slowly, processing.
"Okay. I mean, it's not what I expected, but... okay."
"Okay," Chloe repeated. "Yeah, okay. It's your life. And honestly, you seemed happier last night than I've seen you in ages." He shrugged. "Plus, you've got better fashion sense as Chloe than Emmanuel ever did." Relief washed over her, followed quickly by the realization of how much work lay ahead. One accepting roommate didn't mean the world would be as understanding, but it was a start. "The red shoes nearly killed me, though," she admitted, with a small laugh.
"Beauty is pain, or so I've heard,"
Marcus replied, a tentative smile returning. "So, what now?" "Now I figure out how to be Chloe all the time." The next few weeks were a blur of practical challenges. Chloe's wardrobe needed expansion beyond party dresses. Her single blonde wig wasn't sufficient for daily wear, and the painful red stilettos had to be supplemented with more practical footwear. She found herself at thrift stores and discount retailers, carefully building a collection of everyday clothes, blouses in soft fabrics, jeans cut for women, sweaters that emphasized her developing sense of style. The blonde wig remained her signature, but she invested in higher quality options that looked more natural, keeping the same color to maintain consistency. Her boss at the graphic design firm was surprisingly accommodating when Chloe requested a meeting and explained her situation. The Human Resources Department arranged sensitivity training for the staff, and aside from a few awkward interactions, her coworkers adapted to addressing her as Chloe rather than Emmanuel. Not everything was smooth. Her parents struggled with the change, alternating between tentative support and frustrated confusion. Old friends drifted away, uncomfortable with her transformation. The practical aspects of living as Chloe sometimes felt overwhelming: voice training, makeup application, wardrobe maintenance, navigating public spaces that suddenly felt more threatening. But through it all, one thing remained consistent. Chloe never considered turning back. Emmanuel's clothes remained untouched in the back of her closet, eventually donated to make room for her expanding wardrobe. The emerald dress from New Year's Eve hung prominently as a reminder of that pivotal moment. 3 months after the party, Chloe sat in a coffee shop, waiting for a blind date arranged through a dating app. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves, her outfit casual but carefully chosen, a cream-colored blouse with dark jeans and comfortable ballet flats. The red stilettos only made appearances on special occasions now. "Chloe?" She looked up to see a tall man with kind eyes standing beside her table. "David?" He nodded, taking the seat across from her. "It's nice to meet you. You look exactly like your profile picture." Chloe smiled, remembering the deliberation that had gone into selecting that photo. "Thank you. So do you." Their conversation flowed easily as they discovered shared interests in indie films and hiking. When David asked about her work, Chloe explained her role as a graphic designer without hesitation. When the topic shifted to family, she mentioned her complicated relationship with her parents without elaborating on the reasons. As coffee extended into a walk through the park and plans for dinner the following weekend, Chloe realized she hadn't once thought about her past as Emmanuel during their entire conversation. She was simply living as herself, moving forward rather than constantly looking back. The red stilettos now sat on a shelf in her closet, more memento than footwear. They represented both the discomfort of her beginning and the boldness of her first steps. The emerald dress hung nearby, a reminder of the night when a dare had given her permission to become herself. 6 months after the New Year's Eve party, Chloe celebrated her half-year rebirth day with a small gathering of her closest supporters. Marcus was there with Jasmine, along with new friends who had only ever known her as Chloe. Her blonde hair was longer now, her own natural hair that she'd been growing out since the transition began, dyed to match the shade she'd chosen that first night.
"To Chloe,"
Marcus toasted, raising his glass. "Who had the courage to be herself when most of us are still figuring out who we are?" Glasses clinked. Chloe looked around at the small circle of people who had accepted her without question, who saw her as she truly was, rather than who she had pretended to be. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Chloe stood in front of her mirror, examining her reflection. The confident woman looking back bore little resemblance to the person who had nervously donned an emerald dress and painful red stilettos on a dare. This Chloe moved with grace, spoke with conviction, and lived without apology. She opened her closet and ran her fingers over the emerald fabric of the dress that had changed everything. Beside it hung outfits for work, for play, for all the ordinary and extraordinary moments of her life as Chloe. Not a costume, not a disguise, simply her wardrobe. The red stilettos sat on their shelf, a reminder of both pain and possibility. Chloe picked them up, remembering the discomfort of those first tentative steps and the exhilaration that had made the pain worthwhile. She hadn't worn them since that night. They were too impractical, too much a symbol rather than a functional part of her life now. With careful deliberation, she placed them in a decorative box along with photos from the New Year's Eve party and a handwritten account of that night. This was her personal time capsule, preserving the moment when a dare had given her permission to become herself. As she closed the box, her phone buzzed with a text from David. They had been dating steadily for 3 months now. He knew her history and had accepted it without reservation, seeing her completely as the woman she was, rather than the man she had once pretended to be. "Just wanted to say goodnight, and that I'm looking forward to tomorrow," his message read. They had plans for a weekend getaway, her first overnight trip as a couple since beginning her transition. "Good night," she replied. "Can't wait." Setting down her phone, Chloe took one last look at her reflection. The blonde hair that had once been a wig was now her own, growing longer each day. The confident posture had replaced the hesitant stance of someone afraid to take up space. The woman in the mirror was no longer a costume put on for a party. She was Chloe, fully and completely. A year after the New Year's Eve party, Chloe found herself standing in the same living room where her journey had begun. Marcus and Jasmine were hosting again, though many faces had changed. Some friends had drifted away, uncomfortable with Chloe's transition. New friends had taken their places, people who only knew her as she truly was. The emerald dress hung in her closet at home, too meaningful to risk damaging at another party. Instead, Chloe wore a sleek black cocktail dress that complemented her blonde hair, paired with comfortable black heels that allowed her to move with confidence. David stood beside her, his hand resting gently on the small of her back. They had been together for 9 months now, their relationship growing stronger as Chloe grew more comfortable in her identity.
"I can't believe it's been a year,"
Marcus said, handing them champagne flutes.
"Remember how nervous you were?"
Chloe laughed. "I was terrified. Those red shoes nearly killed me." "The shoes!" Jasmine exclaimed. "I forgot about those. Whatever happened to them?" "They're in a memory box at home," Chloe explained. "Too painful for everyday wear, but too important to get rid of." As midnight approached, Chloe found herself reflecting on the extraordinary year that had passed. She had expected the physical transformation to be the most challenging part, the wardrobe's changes, the voice training, the everyday logistics of presenting as female. Instead, the greatest change had been internal, learning to move through the world without apology, without constantly second-guessing her right to exist as herself. 10, 9, 8. The countdown began around them. David squeezed her hand. "Any resolutions for the new year?" 3, 2, 1. "Just to keep being Chloe," she replied as cheers erupted around them. "That's more than enough." Their kiss was sweet and lingering, a promise of the year to come. When they separated, David's eyes were full of emotion.
"I have something for you,"
he said, reaching into his pocket.
"I was going to wait, but this moment seems right."
He pulled out a small velvet box. Chloe's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a delicate necklace with an emerald pendant.
"It reminded me of that dress you told me about," he explained. "The one you wore when you first became Chloe."
Tears welled in her eyes as he fastened the necklace around her neck. The emerald caught the light, throwing green reflections that reminded her of that pivotal night. "It's perfect," she whispered. Later that night, after the party had wound down and they had returned to her apartment, Chloe stood before her mirror. The blonde hair she had so carefully maintained framed her face. The black dress accentuated the figure she had worked to achieve. The emerald pendant rested against her collarbone, a symbol of her journey. The red stilettos remained in their memory box, no longer needed, but never forgotten. They had carried her through her first steps as Chloe, painful but necessary, awkward but brave. David appeared behind her in the mirror, wrapping his arms around her waist.
"Happy New Year, Chloe."
"Happy New Year," she replied, leaning back against him. The woman in the mirror showed no traces of Emmanuel, not in her appearance, nor in her bearing, nor in her sense of self. Chloe had fully emerged, authentic and complete. 2 years after that fateful New Year's Eve party, Chloe stood before a different mirror in a different dress. White lace cascaded around her, the product of countless fittings and adjustments to perfectly suit her figure. Her blonde hair was arranged in an elegant updo, small flowers woven through the strands. "Ready?" Jasmine asked, adjusting the veil one final time. Chloe nodded, too overcome with emotion for words. In the adjoining room, guests were gathering to witness her marriage to David. Her journey from Emmanuel to Chloe had been challenging, beautiful, painful, and ultimately transformative. The emerald dress that had started it all now hung in a climate-controlled preservation box, a treasured artifact of her becoming. The red stilettos remained in their memory box, now accompanied by other mementos of her journey. Her first prescription for hormone therapy, before and after photos documenting her physical changes, cards of support from friends who had stood by her, and journal entries chronicling her emotional evolution. "You're something green," Jasmine said, touching the emerald pendant that rarely left Chloe's neck. "And here's your something borrowed." She handed Chloe a delicate anklet. "It's not much, but I wore it at my wedding. Tradition, you know." "It's perfect," Chloe managed, her voice thick with emotion. "And you're something blue?" Chloe smiled, lifting her dress slightly to reveal pale blue ballet flats. "I learned my lesson with those red stilettos. No painful shoes on important days." They laughed together, the memory of those uncomfortable first steps now fodder for gentle humor rather than anxiety. The music changed in the adjacent room, signaling it was time. Chloe took a deep breath, smoothed her dress one final time, and turned toward the door. "Emmanuel would be proud of you," Jasmine said softly, "for becoming who you were always meant to be." Chloe shook her head. "Emmanuel was never real. He was a mask I wore because I didn't know I could take it off." She smiled at her friend. "But thank you for accepting me then and now." As she walked down the aisle toward David, Chloe carried with her the lessons of those red stilettos. That pain could lead to growth, that discomfort could precede joy, that taking uncertain steps forward was better than standing still in falsehood. Her father, who had struggled with her transition before eventually coming to acceptance, held her arm firmly as they walked. In the audience, she spotted Marcus giving her a subtle thumbs up. Her mother dabbed at tears with a handkerchief. Friends from every stage of her journey filled the rows, witnessing this culmination of her becoming. David's eyes never left hers as she approached. In his gaze was everything she had ever hoped for: recognition, acceptance, admiration, love. He saw her completely, both the journey she had taken and the woman who stood before him. When she reached him and her father placed her hand in his, Chloe felt the final pieces of her transformation click into place. The emerald pendant at her neck caught the light, casting small green reflections on her white dress. The blonde hair she had grown and maintained framed her face in soft waves. The comfortable blue flats allowed her to stand firm and grounded in this moment. "You look beautiful," David whispered as they turned to face the officiant. "I feel beautiful," she replied. And it was true, not just in the superficial sense of her appearance, but in the deeper sense of living authentically. The beautiful truth of being exactly who she was meant to be. The red stilettos that had carried her through her first painful steps as Chloe remained safely preserved at home. She no longer needed their precarious height or their symbolic discomfort. The emerald dress that had marked her emergence was similarly preserved, a cherished relic of her beginning, but the woman who had worn them continued to evolve and grow. Chloe stood tall in her comfortable blue flats, her hand in David's, her heart open to the future that stretched before them. The dare that had given her permission to emerge had long since been fulfilled and surpassed. Now she moved forward, not because of external challenges, but because of internal certainty. As she spoke her vows, Chloe's voice was clear and confident, the voice she had trained and practiced until it became naturally her own. As she exchanged rings with David, her hands were steady and sure, the hands that had learned to apply makeup, to style her blonde hair, to craft a new life from the remnants of her old one. And as they were pronounced married, as David lifted her veil and kissed her with tender reverence, Chloe knew with absolute certainty that Emmanuel had not simply been left behind on that New Year's Eve 2 years ago. He had never truly existed at all. There had only ever been Chloe, waiting for the courage to emerge, for the perfect emerald dress, for the painful but necessary steps in those red stilettos. Now she walked in comfortable shoes of her own choosing, on a path of her own making, toward a future bright with possibilities.
"I love you,"
David whispered, as they turned to face their cheering friends and family. "I love you too," Chloe replied, squeezing his hand. The emerald pendant caught the light once more, a small reminder of her beginning carried forward into her continuing story. The red stilettos had served their purpose. The emerald dress had played its role. Now Chloe herself, authentic, complete, and loved, stepped forward into the rest of her life.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!